Putin is melting down as Ukraine's drones hit Moscow hard ahead of Russia's May 9th Victory Day parade. A terrifying night attack has grounded planes and sent a message to Putin. Ukraine intends to paralyze Moscow ahead of Putin's parade. The reports are already coming in from Russia's air defense forces. On May 7th, Russia claimed to have intercepted a small horde of Ukrainian drones as they were en route to Moscow. We don't know what types of drones Ukraine sent or what their intended targets were. The odds are that Ukraine hoped to use the drones to destroy key infrastructure in or around Moscow. However, it doesn't matter. According to Russia, its air defense forces shot down every drone that Ukraine sent during that night of May 6th. The Russian capital's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, claimed that Ukraine sent the drones in advance of Putin's Victory Day parade in an attempt to disrupt Russia's upcoming festivities. It wasn't successful. Air defense forces of the defense ministry repelled another drone attack on Moscow, was the simple statement that Sobyanin delivered in the wake of the attack. The Moscow mayor also claimed that destruction of the drones led to debris falling over several areas of Moscow. Emergency crews are apparently already working on cleanup operations, and we don't know if any of that debris caused damage. This was one of the largest attacks by Ukraine, with over 500 drones intercepted across Russia. Kyiv Independent claims Sobyanin says that Moscow's aerial defenses shot down at least 7 drones during the course of a single evening. Still, it's an attack that appeared to have a marked impact on the city. Though there are no burning buildings or destroyed oil depots this time around, Ukraine did succeed in forcing Moscow to temporarily shut down 4 of its major airports for a few hours, while the drone barrage was ongoing. That was confirmed by Ukraine's Security Service, or SBU. According to the SBU, the drones sent to Moscow forced Russia to initiate planned cover, which is a security protocol that sees Russia ground civilian air traffic for as long as an attack is ongoing. Disruption was the result. According to the BBC, the shutdowns led to at least 60,000 passengers being stranded, either in one of 4 airports that were closed down or in the skies above Moscow. Other planes had to be diverted, forcing passengers to figure out alternative arrangements for getting into Russia's capital. That same report provides even more numbers, and it hints at the Ukraine attack being much larger than 7 drones, the Kyiv Independent suggests. Ukraine hit Moscow hard enough to affect 350 flights on the evening of May 6th, with the Russian Defense Ministry later claiming that it destroyed a staggering 524 Ukrainian drones during that evening. The BBC also amended the Kyiv Independent's figures, stating that Sobyanin now claims Russia shot down 19 drones over Moscow. It seems like Russia can't quite get its story straight. Still, 19 is just a tiny fraction of the 524 drones Russia claims to have destroyed on May 6th, which tells us something important. Not all of Ukraine's drones were heading to Moscow. But we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, we know that Ukraine succeeded in temporarily shutting down several of Moscow's key airports. Why does that matter? It seems like a small victory in the grand scheme of the war. However, these airport closures have achieved something significant for Ukraine. They humiliated Putin on the eve of a parade designed to celebrate Russia's leader. Therein lays the goal of the Moscow attacks. Ukraine wanted to send a message, not just to Putin, but to all of the world leaders who've confirmed they'll be attending Russia's parade. You won't be safe. That'll hurt Putin. In the build-up to Russia's victory parade, he has called for a 3-day ceasefire between May 8th and 10th to allow Russia to celebrate the 80th anniversary of its victory during World War II. Kremlin mouthpiece Dmitry Peskov outlined what Russia wants with a statement: "Fire will be halted, but should the Kyiv regime fail to do the same, and should it continue to strike our positions and facilities, then an appropriate response will be given immediately," Peskov claimed. The call for a ceasefire showcases a remarkable level of arrogance on Russia's part. Having spent the last few months delaying every move made toward a much longer 30-day ceasefire, Putin now seems to believe that he can order Ukraine to stop fighting whenever he wants. Ukraine isn't taking Russia's leader seriously, nor should it. Peskov's mentions of Ukraine potentially attacking during the supposed ceasefire, along with Russia responding, tell us that this is no true ceasefire at all. Russia fully intends to continue fighting in Ukraine during its parade. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is very aware of this fact. He has called Putin's proclamation of a parade ceasefire a theatrical play, designed to create the illusion that Russia is interested in a ceasefire without actually committing to one that matters. 3 days isn't enough to start any meaningful negotiations, Zelenskyy points out. Ukraine is continuing to push for a 30-day ceasefire to give Ukraine's and Russia's leaders a chance to sit down and talk about a larger peace settlement. Putin isn't going for that offer. Instead, he wants a ceasefire because he intends to use Russia's Victory Day parade as a chance to hobnob with the world leaders who've agreed to attend. The Guardian reports that the delegation of foreign leaders heading into Moscow for Putin's parade will be the largest to attend Russia's annual Victory Day festivities since Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Putin intends to use that fact as leverage. He wants his parade to demonstrate that Russia isn't as isolated on the world stage as the West has attempted to make it through its sanctions and ongoing support of Ukraine. Russia wants to put on a good show. Sky News reports that dozens of world leaders, including the heads of state of nations including Vietnam, Egypt, and Brazil, will be in attendance. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is already in Moscow ahead of the parade, as is Putin's big get for the event, Chinese President Xi Jinping. Make no mistake about it, this is a massive PR victory for Russia, at least in the Kremlin's eyes. The fact that so many world leaders have committed to spending time in Moscow for the parade shows the rest of the world that Russia still has allies. Ukraine's goal with its Moscow drone strike becomes clearer. The strike was likely never intended to take out any specific targets. Instead, Ukraine's goal was to unnerve the world leaders who would be involved in Putin's celebrations. They served as a small demonstration of the war that Russia's leader has brought to Ukraine. But perhaps more importantly, the attack also acted as a warning. Ukraine can send drones to Moscow ahead of Putin's parade. It can also send them during the festivities. That's the key message Ukraine wants to get across, as it's warned that there will be no ceasefire during Putin's parade. Zelenskyy said as much when speaking to Ukrainian news agency Interfax, mere days before Ukraine launched drones that shut down Moscow's key airports. Our position is very simple for all countries traveling to Russia on May 9th. We cannot be responsible for what happens on the territory of the Russian Federation, Zelenskyy warned. He also told the arriving leaders with food for thought when it comes to how secure they'll be when they arrive in Russia. They provide you with security. Therefore, we won't give you any guarantees, Zelenskyy said, because we don't know what Russia will do these days. Translation: Ukraine fully expects Russia to continue its assaults in Ukraine, regardless of what Putin says about a ceasefire. If, or more likely when, that happens, Ukraine will strike back. Zelenskyy seems to want the world leaders in Moscow to think the next attack on Moscow might be bigger, stronger, and cause significant damage to Putin's parade. Zelenskyy is trying to get ahead of what he knows Putin will pull during the supposed ceasefire. He even told Interfax that he fully expects Russia to provoke Ukraine with arson, bombings, and so on, only to blame us. Ukraine knows that Putin is using the Victory Day parade as a PR ploy. Russia's leader wants to show the world that Russia isn't isolated while creating a situation where he can position Ukraine as the bad guy if it attacks. Zelenskyy understands all of this. And it likely isn't going to stop Ukraine from targeting Moscow during the Victory Day parade. Why? Because Ukraine sees that parade as an insult. In a statement released just hours before Ukraine forced Moscow to shut down 4 of its airports, the country's foreign ministry called on all foreign states to refrain from the participation of their military personnel in the parade at Moscow. It went a step further, adding that Putin's parade would be regarded by Ukraine as an insult to the memory of the victory over Nazism and the memory of millions of Ukrainian frontline soldiers who liberated our country and all of Europe from Nazism 8 decades ago. Again, the message from Ukraine is crystal clear. The country isn't buying anything that Putin is selling when it comes to his Victory Day parade. That means the drone attacks on Moscow a couple of days ago were a warning, a precursor of what may be to come if Putin goes ahead with his parade. But that's not all. Earlier, we mentioned that Russia claimed to have shot down over 500 drones on the same evening that Ukraine shut down 4 of Moscow's airports. That clues us into the fact that what happened in Moscow was just a small part of a much wider attack that's among the largest drone strikes Ukraine has ever conducted on Russian territory. The strikes were widespread. The BBC's May 7th report on the drone strikes reveals the full extent of what Ukraine achieved. Beyond Moscow, Ukraine also targeted several other major Russian cities, including St. Petersburg and Sochi. The former wasn't immune to airport restrictions. Around 55 flights heading into or out of St. Petersburg, which is Russia's second city, were either delayed or cancelled as a result of Ukraine's drones. The BBC says that footage out of the city's main airport revealed huge queues of planes lining up on its runways, all waiting for the go-ahead to take to the skies once more. Ukraine even succeeded in disrupting at least one world leader's flight, the plane carrying Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, to divert to Azerbaijan for a few hours before making its way into Moscow. That alone served as a demonstration that Putin isn't as accepted by world leaders as he wants his Victory Day parade to demonstrate. Vučić was forced to land in Azerbaijan because neither Latvia nor Lithuania, both Baltic states that consider Russia a major threat, were willing to allow his aircraft to enter their airspace. Something similar happened to Slovakian Prime Minister Rob Fico, who complained about disruption to his schedule when the third Baltic state, Estonia, refused to allow him to fly over its airspace en route to Moscow. There are messages in these refusals. Putin may have managed to get 27 world leaders to agree to attend his egotistical parade. However, those threatened by his attempts to expand the Russian Federation are sticking together to let all those arriving in Russia know that they refuse to support Putin's agenda. However, we can't escape something that may be bugging you as well. Russia supposedly shot down more than 500 Ukrainian drones on May 6th. Is shutting down a few airports really the only thing that Ukraine managed to achieve with what appears to be a massive strike? While Moscow grabbed all the headlines and served as a warning to world leaders heading to Putin's parade, Ukraine was busy elsewhere, using its drones to cause some real damage to Russia. On the same evening that Ukraine forced several airports in Moscow to shut down, it also launched a devastating attack against the Bazalt weapons manufacturing plant in the Russian town of Krasnoarmysk. Located within the Moscow Oblast, Krasnoarmysk is key to Putin's plans in Ukraine because the town's plant produces arms and thousands of rounds of ammunition that are sent to the front lines for Putin's soldiers to use. It's an obvious target, and Ukraine just hit it hard. According to Pravda, reports coming out of Krasnoarmysk from local residents suggest that Ukraine's drone attack on the town caused at least 7 explosions at the Bazalt facility, which combined to spark a massive fire. Ukraine's defense forces even commented on the strike, said that, unlike the Russians, who strike apartment buildings in peaceful cities, the SSU targets only military facilities that support the enemy's armed aggression against Ukraine. Efforts to weaken Russia's military capabilities will continue. Bazalt wasn't the only facility Ukraine targeted on May 6th. The country's long-range drones also touched down at the Splav plant in Tula, which is a city located just 110 miles away from Moscow. That's another key facility for Putin. The Kyiv Independent reports that it's the only factory Russia has that's capable of both designing and producing the multiple launch rocket systems, along with ammunition for those systems that Russia is using in Ukraine. Again, Ukraine's strike was a success. The outlet claims that footage from the region showed flames and heavy smoke engulfing parts of the facility, suggesting that Russia's claims of shooting down so many drones are inaccurate. Don't ignore these 2 successful strikes against weapons plants in the context of the warning Ukraine is delivering to the world leaders heading to Moscow. The drones that shut down Moscow's airports were a warning, a demonstration by Ukraine that its drones can reach Russia's capital city and wreak havoc, even when they're not directly attacking any of the city's infrastructure. That should worry people like President Xi, because Ukraine is implying that its next wave of drones could arrive during Putin's parade. With the Bazalt and Splav strikes, Ukraine has also found a way to demonstrate to those world leaders what could happen if Ukraine decides to conduct a full strike on Moscow. It's just shut down 2 of Putin's major weapons plants. Ukraine's drones would have needed to evade Russian air defenses to achieve that goal. The message is clear. The airports were a demonstration that Ukraine's drones can reach Moscow, with Bazalt and Splav showcasing what those drones can do if Ukraine wants to go on the attack. That all leads us to an obvious question. What happens next? By the time this video is published, Putin's supposed ceasefire will be in effect. It began at midnight local time on May 8th, and it's intended to run for the next 3 days. And wouldn't you just know it, Putin has already broken the terms he set for that ceasefire. According to Ukraine, at around 3 a.m. local time, Russia launched a glide bomb assault on the Ukrainian city of Sumy. Ukraine's claims haven't been independently verified yet. However, the strike is in keeping with Putin's long-held pattern of claiming to hold ceasefires only to launch attacks when he thinks that his enemies might have fallen for his ruse. The glide bomb attack won't come as a surprise to Ukraine. It's already rejected Putin's ceasefire because it knew Russia's leader would pull something like this. Still, what's happened in Sumy is confirmation, if any were needed, that there will be no ceasefire for Russia's Victory Day parade. The fighting will continue, and with it comes the increased threat that Ukraine is going to respond with an attack of its own on May 9th. The question now is simple: will Ukraine hit the parade? That's a difficult question to answer. Though Ukraine is making threats, reinforced by its Moscow drone assault, attacking the parade directly could place it in a very sticky situation. For example, what happens if an attack leads to one of the world leaders attending Putin's parade being killed or injured? What if that casualty is Xi Jinping, for example? Ukraine would find itself facing the wrath of another nation as it continues to fight against Russia, providing that nation with justification to get directly involved in Putin's invasion. Ukraine doesn't want that. So even if the country has suggested that it can't guarantee the security of the leaders attending Putin's parade, it seems unlikely that Ukraine will attack the parade directly. What it may do instead is attempt to get the entire event shut down by hitting other areas of Moscow so hard that Putin is forced to consider his safety ahead of his desire to stroke his ego. There's a possibility that may happen. After all, Russia has already been forced into scrapping a similar victory parade, due to be held in the Crimean port of Sevastopol. On May 5th, just a day before Ukraine launched its Moscow drone attack, the Moscow Times reported that the military parade scheduled in the city had been shut down. Officials cited safety concerns, and they're right to do so. Not only is Crimea in closer range of Ukraine's missiles and drones than Moscow, but the region doesn't benefit from having a collection of world leaders attending its parade. It's the third year in a row that the Crimean parade has been shut down, showing us that Putin is willing to make concessions when he believes his people are under threat. Could that be what Ukraine is shooting for in Moscow on May 9th? Rather than attacking the parade directly, it could launch assaults against military facilities in and around Moscow to force a cancellation that would leave Putin humiliated without causing a direct conflict with any of the world leaders attending the parade. It's possible. We'll know for sure on May 9th when Putin holds his Victory Day parade. For now, let us know in the comments what you think about Ukraine's drone attack on Moscow. What message did Zelenskyy want to send to Putin by shutting down 4 of Moscow's airports? Are more attacks coming? How often do you think Putin will break his own ceasefire? Share your opinions with us and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more commentary on the latest Ukraine war developments.